All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Ting Sun. I'm a member of the California State Board of Education, and I want to thank you for joining us today. Welcome, and I want to say welcome to you to the first meeting of the California Workforce Pathways Joint Advisory Committee. And since we're entering into a new year, I'm happy to announce that I will continue to serve on the committee as vice chair this year. And I'm thrilled to announce that Bill Rawlings from the Board of Governors of the California Community Colleges has agreed to be our chair for 2021. So I will now pass this meeting over to our new chair, Bill Rawlings.
All right, thank you, Ting. I definitely have big shoes to fill of the past couple of years where we've had some really wonderful, strong women leading this Joint Advisory Committee, so I hope I'm going to do you all justice. So I'm humbled to be the chair for this year. This is a little personal for me because I come from a background in CTE. I'd gone to Pomona Unified School District, graduated from Goodrich High School after some years in different CTE programs there, and attended Fullerton College, where I got a background in technology and computer repair. And that's where I've built my career for the past 27 years in the California community colleges. And I don't think my friends and my mentors at Fullerton College, some of which are still employed down there, would have imagined that the little nerdy kid that they picked up from the music program being a computer technician would have the wide varied career that I've had, but this has been a wonderful ride. So with that, thank you all for joining us. Due to the pandemic, this meeting is going to be conducted virtually. I will ask for everyone's patience as I work through my first meeting in this virtual environment particularly. Today's meeting is being broadcast through a live webcast. Interested parties can view the broadcast by visiting the California Workforce Pathways webpage and click on the live stream link located under the 2021 Public Meeting Notices, Agendas, and Minutes. A recording of the webcast will be archived at the California Workforce Pathways webpage in about a week. I also have the following announcements to ensure that we have smooth meetings. First, please keep all microphones on mute. All attendance and motions will be taken by roll call, especially because we're in a virtual environment. Committee members should use the raise hand feature in Zoom to be recognized for providing comment or question. And I do have a panel up where I can catch some of the members' comments, but hopefully staff will fill in the gaps where I miss someone. And then last, I will ask for public comment for each agenda item, and again at the end of the meeting. And public comments can be made via Zoom, email, or by phone, and all options are posted on the agenda. We do have a few items to cover today. It'll be a little heavy meeting at parts. And so first will be an update on our state initiatives, so the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant and the K-12 Strong Workforce Program. After that, we'll continue our conversation around data, and then we'll conclude today's meeting with an update on the California State Plan for CTE. And since we must have a quorum to continue, staff, will you do the roll call for us?
Of course. Chair Rawlings.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Sun.
Here.
Member Grande.
Present.
Member McQuillan.
Good morning. Present.
Member Rucker. Hopefully she can join soon. Ex officio member McGuire.
Present.
Good morning. And ex officio member Rattray. And hopefully he'll join soon.
All right.
We have 4 members in attendance.
Very good. So we have 4 members in attendance, and we have our ex officio. So it is now 8:36, and I will call this meeting to order. Before starting today's meeting, Dr. Stephanie Gregson, the Chief Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, would like to introduce herself to the committee and those in attendance. Dr. Gregson.
Thank you, Chair Rawlings. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members of California Workforce Program Joint Advisory Committee. As Chair Rawlings noted, I'm Dr. Stephanie Gregson, Chief Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, and I'm happy to join you for today's meeting. The work that you do to enhance and support high-quality career technical education programs throughout the state is so very important. I know because that's where my family went. I am the first college graduate in my family, so I understand the importance of career tech education programs. I appreciate your dedication to addressing issues on the career tech and vocational education world. The guidance and wisdom you share with all is incredibly valuable. I also appreciate the staff members from the California Community Colleges, the State Board of Education, and our team at the California Department of Education. The collaboration between everyone assembled here today is the key to providing successful CTE programs and opportunities for our students. I look forward to learning more about the work of the Joint Advisory Committee, and thank you for having me here with you today.
Thank you, Dr. Gregson. It's great to have you on board. Before moving to the first agenda item, I will ask Lisa Reimers to introduce and announce the staff who are supporting this meeting remotely.
Yes, good morning. So from the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office, we have Sheni Weber, Vice Chancellor of the Workforce and Economic Development Division, and Sandra Sanchez, the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the Workforce and Economic Development Division. From the California Department of Education, you heard from Dr. Stephanie Gregson, our Chief Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction. We also have Pradeep Kodamaraju, Division Director of the Career and College Transition Division, Stephanie Pappas, Education Administrator for the Access for All branch, Michelle McIntosh, Education Administrator from the Career and College Transition Division, myself, Lisa Reimers, from the Career and College Transition Division, and Rachel Moran, Staff Services Manager from the Career and College Transition Division. From the State Board of Education, we have Patricia DeCoste, the Deputy Executive Director, and Pam Castleman, an Education Programs Consultant.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. So our first item of business, item one, is the approval of the California Workforce Pathways Joint Advisory Committee's November 20th, 2020 preliminary report of action, our draft minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I will
So
move.
moved. Or second.
All right. I heard Vice Chair Sun and as the motion and Member Grande as the second. Is there any discussion? All right. Seeing none, can we have the roll call?
Yes, Chair Rawlings.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sun.
Aye.
Member Grande.
Aye.
Member McQuillan.
Yes.
And Member Rucker is not with us yet, so passed with 4.
All right. Very good. And I noticed that Patricia DeCoste recognized that Member Rutter joined the meeting. So the motion passes, and the approved report of action minutes for the November 20th, 2020 meeting and the recording of today's broadcast will be available on the California Workforce Pathways webpage in probably a few days. On to item number 2, the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant and the K-12 Strong Workforce Program update. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Pradeep Kodamaraju, Director of the Career and College Transition Division, Michelle McIntosh, Administrator for the CTE Leadership Office from the California Department of Education, and Sandra Sanchez, Assistant Vice Chancellor of the Workforce and Economic Development Division at the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office, and they will share an update on our state initiatives. Dr. Kodamaraju.
Thank you, Chair Rawlings. The presentation will be done by Michelle and Sandra, but this is our regular update to you on our state CTE programs and talk about what's occurred recently and what is going to happen moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle McIntosh to begin the agenda's presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Kodamaraju, and good morning, members. Next slide, please. So for the fiscal year 2021 Career Technical Education Grant, allocations for grantees were approved by the State Board of Education earlier this month in January. $150 million was allocated to the grant this year. Of the $150 million allocated, there were 341 grantees, which were eligible for $139 million based on the calculation, and 11 million was reallocated to the group to make up the 150 million total allocation. We received a total of 389 applications. There were 341 awards, representing a total of 519 local education agencies collectively within these grants. 37 of the awardees were consortia, and 26 LEAs applied and were actually included in 2 grants. So they applied both individually and then also as part of a consortia. Thank you. As far as there was another bullet on that screen regarding the total ask. And so the ask for over $311 million, that would be if there was enough to match what LEAs actually requested in total. So that's what that $311 million does make up. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So for fiscal year 21-22, as we move forward, we're currently working on the request for applications. A team is being established to review the RFA to streamline the application process prior to release. And we are also working to include more specific program data into the application, such as asking about specific sectors and specific pathways that are being addressed, as well as a little bit more deeper dive into how many middle schools are being served with the program as well. So that concludes my presentation, and then available for any questions.
Right. Members, are there any questions or comments so far? And you can use the raise hand feature. All right. I am not seeing any yet. And is there a further presentation?
Yes, that'll be with Sandra Sanchez. So I'll turn it over to Sandra for the K-12 Strong Workforce Program.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, Chair Rollins and members of the board. As was stated earlier, I am Sandra Sanchez, the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the Workforce and Economic Development Division of the community colleges. Today I had planned to update you on 3 areas, the round 3 Strong Workforce K-12 application cycles, on the round 1 applicants and their interim measures data, which we are still in the process of analyzing, and finally an update on the key talent, the K-14 TAPs and pathway coordinators. Unfortunately, I'm unable to update you on the interim measures data that was provided during the last joint advisory meeting. We understand that there has been a delay in posting of the 1920 course enrollment data due to the challenges LEAs are experiencing with the pandemic situation. As soon as the 1920 data is posted, we will start the next phase of analysis and bring you a report on the following. We're looking at the total number of students enrolled in the Strong Workforce K-12 supported CTE pathways by sector for 1920, total number of students enrolled in the Strong Workforce K-12 supported early college credit, dual enrollment, high school articulation offerings for 1920, and total number of students enrolled in Strong Workforce supported CTE pathways by types of activities to support course and pathways in 1920. So in addition to that, we'll give you an overview of our observations that I had mentioned at the last meeting. But for today, I'm going to focus on the other 2 items. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see some common acronyms for the benefit of the members. For those of you who are not familiar with the K-12 Strong Workforce Program, we use a lot of abbreviations. We want to make sure that you were aware of what we are referring to when we use these acronyms, whether it's in writing or when I refer to them and you're unclear. So I want to make sure that you had this information. Next slide, please. So as you may recall from the last time we met, our application submission window closed in October. And so for round 3, we received 304 applications. We actually awarded 263. we had a total ask of $543,026. Of course, as you know, we are allocated $150 million, and this slide is actually not correct. For round 3, we actually awarded $149,999,730. And the reason for that, there was a staff error in one of our regions for the amount awarded. One of the numbers was transposed, and that left a balance of $270. And so we will take these funds and distribute it in the next round of awards. But I wanted to be clear that you'll see in some charts coming up that it will say 149 million, not 150 million. And I didn't want you to think that we weren't aware of the discrepancy. Next slide, please. So in the next few slides, you have an application, a breakdown by application by region for each of the rounds of funding and the total amounts requested. So I think you can go on to the next 2 slides. And if I'm not mistaken, the one more slide. You can see this is how we get to the totals of what everyone requested over the 3 rounds. So you can see there's a tremendous need in the field for these funds, and there's no shortage of asks. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides give you a breakdown of awards by region. And so the prior 3 were the breakdown of asks, and this is what we actually awarded for each of the regions. It's pretty consistent. You can see the regions tend to stay within a range of applications. We are actively working with the regions, and I'll give you an update on that, on how the pathway coordinators and the TAPs are supporting the field in trying to submit applications for their various LEAs. So just a quick reminder, each regional consortium has a K-12 selection committee that is responsible for reviewing all of these applications and requesting the funds within its region. The selection committee makes all of the decisions within its region related to selecting grant recipients and awarding specific funding amounts for each grant. Each regional consortium forms a K-12 selection committee made up of individuals with expertise in K-12 career technical education and workforce development. And this is actually in the ed code for this program. Next slide, please. And here you can see what I was referring to in terms of the total amount that we actually awarded. It's $149,999,730. Next slide, please. So in the next few slides, what you'll see is a breakdown of all of the awards by round for each of the 15 industry sectors that the CDE adheres to in their programming. So one of the things that we wanted to see is how the investments were taking place by sector. So we broke it down for you in the next, I would say, next slide. There's 3 slides, I believe. One more. Yes, and then the final slide is the totals again. So you can see the total investment for the past 3 rounds, as well as, in the prior slides, which was the breakdown by sector. So next slide, please. So the other thing that we did for the members is we broke down the total funding for all 3 rounds with a percentage of distribution. So we wanted to see how we were investing this money across the state and making sure that it aligns with labor market demand. And of course, health and science technology is at the top. We have tremendous need across the state. And so across the state, investments in this sector have been significant. And actually, the majority of the funds that have been attributed over the last 3 rounds have gone to this sector. Information and communications technology, of course, right there. As we all know, we're living our Zoom world. It's a high demand area. and obviously one that we are training our students in and making significant investments. And then the next few, as you can see, our top 5 are health, IT, manufacturing, and product development, which I thought was very interesting, but good to hear. Engineering and architecture, and ag and natural resources. So, and the list, go to the next slide, gives you all of the sectors with fashion and interior design rounding out the 15 sectors. So next slide, please. Now I'm gonna just give you an update on the round 3 selection committee. So when we started the process for round 3, we had approximately 188 selection committee members that started the process for review and awarding. However, only 166 members continued after we provided the training, and only 166 participated in the entire process. So if you recall last time, I updated you on this. I had a number of 188. Well, in the process, we lost some folks just simply to the commitment, the time commitment that has to, be put into this process. Over half of the round 3 selection committee members returned from round 2. A majority of the round 3 members represented LEAs, 52%, and then of course followed by community colleges at 26%. Then we had business and industry folks at 11%, and then we had other from workforce investment boards, nonprofits, and other government agencies. The Chancellor's Office provided the regional chairs and the K-14 TAPs with standard training materials, including agendas, calibration tools, and of course, strong workforce K-12 resources to help the committees make informed decisions. And then of course, everyone received training on the intent of the strong workforce legislation, update on each region's priorities, scoring and calibration applications, and the importance of remaining impartial. So just wanted to let you know that we have created standardized training for all of the regions in the state, and everyone is actively using those resources that we have created. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you our draft timeline. Our plan is to work towards making this timeline a reality. We do want to give ourselves enough time to make improvements to the process and to incorporate the lessons learned from the interim data once that is available. And then, of course, making sure that we get feedback from the field to integrate or incorporate into our next application cycle. But this is our proposed draft timeline, and so we are hopeful we will be able to meet this timeline and get the next round of funding out to the field. One of the things that is in legislation is we have to utilize information about our grantees in the evaluation of awards. And so we need to make sure we have some data to give to the selection committees when they go to award the next round of funding. So that's also part of why the timeline is slated for next fall, or this coming fall rather. Next slide. Wait, before I go on, are there any questions?
Any questions from members? I'm seeing 2 with hands raised. I don't see the 2.
I see Member Grande and Member McQuillan.
Very good. Let's start with Member Grande.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the presentation, Sandra. I just wanted to go back a couple of slides, and we don't have to go back, but the question I have is from a couple of slides ago in relation to the number of applications that were awarded. I was just wondering if there's a common theme or thread for the denial of the applications. Is there a particular deficiency that we are seeing come up over and over and over again, or what else might explain someone's application being submitted but not awarded?
To be honest, I don't have that information right now, but I know that it is something we are looking at. We're doing an analysis of who's been awarded over the multiple rounds and who has not. And then also in relation to the number of LEAs in a particular region, and how do we support those regions who either didn't apply or have been denied to make sure that the pathway coordinators and the TAPs are reaching out to them and helping them to be successful in their next round of application. But in terms of your question about why, I don't know, I don't have that information, but I'm happy to research that and bring an update back to the board.
Thank you so much.
All right, I see. Let's go with Member McQuillan next.
Thank you.
And then Member Rattray.
Thank you for the great report. My question is also on the appeals process. Can you share a little more information on that and how that's being handled? Or is it a regional decision and guidelines for each area? Thank you.
The appeals process, we do have a standardized process. After the initial awards are issued, we allow 2 weeks for appeals to be submitted. In our system, which is my understanding different from the K-12 system, appeals are based on process, not content. So that is definitely different from, I think, the K-12 system. You can appeal process, but you can't appeal the content or the decision of the selection committee. So we try, what we have done is in the training materials that we provide to the selection committee members, we ask them, one of the things we stress is that they need to be consistent in their application of whatever rubric they're for selecting grantees. And so when there are appeals, they need to be able to go back and review the process that they used and the rubric that they used for awarding to ensure that folks feel like they had a fair shot at receiving an award and that it's documented. So we really try to make sure that it isn't an arbitrary decision. It is a decision that is of the committee of the whole and that it's documented and that it's applied consistently across all the applications for that region. Does that answer your question? All right, no problem. And I think Member Rattray, you had a question as well?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we got you.
Yeah, I probably missed it, but I just wondered if in the training they get exposed to our guiding principles and the raters are asked to incorporate that in their thinking, in their judgments.
I believe, yes, we do review the guiding principles, but I cannot guarantee it's consistent across the state. So I will make sure that we raise that as a concern and that we have consistent application of that across the state. I know that in the materials we cover that. We cover the intent of the legislation and what the JAC is interested in and wanting to make sure that they are, awarding these in the true spirit of the intent, but there's still room for human error. So we will make sure we emphasize that in our next round. All right, any other questions?
The only question I have, I think you mentioned we get to, I was looking at the breakdown by region and I'm interested in the steps you'll be taking to try and address, maybe underrepresentation in areas like Inland Empire and things like that. But I think you said you would get to that, so I'll leave that for later.
Yeah, we're definitely going to, once we are able to analyze and get the data we need to finish our analysis, we can start to work towards implementing or adjusting our applications based on the information we are able to glean from the data we have.
That'll be great. I look forward to it. And I would also note, I saw Member Rucker join us. So welcome, Member Rucker. So with that, are there any other questions, comments from members of the committee?
Right.
All right, seeing none, go ahead and you can continue.
Okay, thank you. So just an update on the K-14 TAPs by region. As you can see on the slide, there are 2 that are interim. I'm happy to report that LA and Orange County have identified their 2 K-14 TAPs, and they're in the process of hiring those individuals, and they expect to have them announced by mid-February. They are currently going through the hiring and background check process, so they were not able to share those names with me prior to the meeting. But I did want to report that we will have all of our K-14 TAPs in place on a permanent basis, hopefully way before the next time we meet. Next slide, please. So this is an update, and this has not changed. There's no change to the pathway coordinators. We still have a few regions who are trying to replace positions where folks took other positions after they had been hired. So as you know, with staff, there's always turnover, and thankfully our turnover is significantly low for the amount of people that have been in place. So we're at a 96%, which is better than I had hoped, but not obviously 100%. So we're still striving for 100%. Next slide, please. So finally, just to give you an update on what we have been doing with the K-14 TAPs and the pathway coordinators, just some activities that we have engaged in. We have hosted several large-scale trainings for not just the pathway coordinators and TAPs, but also for all ELEs in the various regions to support, the field with data submission and reporting requirements. Next slide. At the end of the year, we also work very closely with CTEIG and the CTEIG team to enhance and provide training specific to the CTEIG program to the TAPs and the pathway coordinators, wanting to make sure that they are able to support the field, not just with strong workforce, but also the CTEIG program. Next slide, please. So for this month and next month, we have some training on work-based learning and career pathways. And, we're also having a meeting in February on the role of business and industry and advisory committees and making sure that the TAPs and the pathway coordinators are well-versed in these areas. Following that, we are currently surveying the TAPs and the PCs and have scheduled meetings with CDE to develop a series of trainings that will provide to the TAPs and the pathway coordinators so they're able to fully support the grantees of both the Strong Workforce K-12 program and the CTEIG program. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any additional questions?
Members, any questions or comments? And following this, I will note that we will be having comments from the public. I understand that there is a bit of a delay in the webcast. And so I want to make sure that members of the public understand that if they are submitting comment via text or email or via Zoom chat, go ahead and start typing and sending now, and we will get to those. But I will start now with member comments or questions. All right. I am seeing no raised hands. All right. Are there any comments from the public?
No, not that I see, unless there's some in chat. But there's no phone and no email.
All right. No phone, no email so far. I will give it another moment. And seeing none so far, we will conclude the public comment period for agenda item 2. If you are a member of the public that wanted to submit a comment on this and weren't able to, we will have time later on in the agenda for you to submit those comments for us. So we are a bit ahead of schedule, it looks like. So I'm wondering if folks want a break or not. If not, we will divide up possibly item 2, because I know this will be a little beefier agenda item, and we could take a break partway through this or at the end of agenda item 2. Is there any?
Chair Rawlings?
Yes, Dr. Kodamraju.
Just because we have presenters from our data teams, I just want to make sure they're on. So could we just take a 5-minute break just to make sure that they're all on the call, so we can make sure they're there, because we, as you said, we are ahead and they were expecting to come a little later.
Very good. I totally appreciate that. So let's go and take 10 minutes, and about 10 minutes. Let's come back. It's 9:07 now. Let's come back and try and resume at 9:15. To confirm that we have a quorum to continue, Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair Rawlings.
I am present.
Vice Chair Sun.
I'm here.
Member Grande.
Here.
Member McQuillan.
Here.
Member Rucker.
Here.
Ex officio Member McGuire.
Present.
And ex officio Member Rattray.
Here.
All here?
Oh, very good. Good job, everyone. So we can continue on with agenda item number 3. It is now 9:16. So I'd like to welcome back Dr. Pradeep Kadaraju, Director of the Career and College Transition Division, and welcome Cindy Kazanis, Director of the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division, who will continue our conversation around data. In addition to staff from the Career and College Transition Division, we are joined by staff from the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division and the Educational Data Management Division to help answer questions committee members may have. So it sounds like a fun team of people here. It's, talking data, it's my kind of folks. So Dr. Kadaraju, please continue with item number 3.
So I am Pradeep Kadaraju, the Director for the Career and College Transition Division. I am privileged to have my colleague from the analysis or for what's affectionately known as AMARD and EDMD, the data divisions at CDE, as Cindy Kazanis, who's a director, and Jonathan Eisler, who's an educational administrator in AMARD, will provide us background of the work that the Korean College Transition Division has been undertaking with the data divisions to try and make uniform in the collection of CTE data and have it included within the CDE data system called CalPads. And after several conversations, meetings, we are in a position to move forward on that to try and get the CTE data collection systematized. And as a result of that, over the next several meetings, we will be able to present to the members different cuts and slices of that CTE data as they relate to both state and federal programs, and provide you information so you can make an informed decision about making recommendations on the 2 state programs, the CTEIG and the K-12 Strong Workforce. Next slide, please. So as I said, as I was talking, we'll talk about the recommendation from the November 20th, 2020 meeting. We will then talk about the collaborative work between the CDE data, CT program division and the CD data divisions, and we'll provide a preliminary data report, interim analysis. One of the things that, as Cindy will talk about is, and Jonathan will as well, is the collaboration that we are undertaking with the Chancellor's Office in trying to have data that reflects both the 2 state programs, because both CTEIG and K-12 Strong Workforce, the data pool is essentially the same. And so we can say, as we move forward, we can say something more about those 2 programs in terms of just in terms of the information that's there and the commonalities and the differences between the two. Next slide, please. What you have on the slide there is a recommendation that you made in the November meeting, and you approved a phased approach for refining and updating the CTEIG and K-12 strong workforce data metrics. Yeah, the phased approach will include a timeline and regular reporting on short-term, intermediate, and long-term CTEIG and K-12 strong workforce metrics. And we will, staff here would identify those metrics and would be reported beginning with the short term that we will be presenting at the end of this presentation. And then we're permitting staff to make necessary and non-substantive clarifying edits to this phased approach. This is, you will see the outline in more detail in attachment 1 of the item. But before I go ahead and turn it over to Cindy, I would like to say the following. I understand there is some concern among members about the legislative report that was sent to the DOF and the legislature. So we can assure you that that we are addressing that concern, and we are drafting an addendum to the legislative report, and will be sent shortly. We will be able to provide a copy to the members, and it's once it's finalized. So we will make sure that that concern is addressed in that addendum to the legislative report. And then we will move forward in providing, as we're doing now, is talking about the implication of data. These are the recommendation that you see that you made in November of last year was essentially a way in terms of providing or meeting the request that you had with regard to presenting data on the 2 state programs, and now we're able to do that with some of the information that is being provided to us from our data divisions. So with that, I will before I just turn it over to Cindy, are there any questions so far on what I've just said? So then we can, if not, I'll turn it over to Cindy.
Thank you for getting ahead of the question about the legislative report, Dr. Kunnaraju. That's very helpful. I do see one hand raised, or there was?
Yeah,
Oh, very good. Vice Chair Sun.
Yes, thank you. So I'm sorry, I wasn't quite understanding what you were saying about the ledge report. I apologize. I just didn't quite understand what you were alluding to on the report.
So I understand there was a concern about the legislative report that the intent of that report was to indicate to the DOF and the legislature that the Joint Advisory Committee did not make any changes or recommend any changes to the data metrics. But it may have been perceived in the report that you had recommended a change. And so as a result of that, we are actually creating an addendum to make sure that it is your intention to say that there have been no changes to the data metrics for this time around. And as you get information get on data reports over the next several meetings, you can make more informed decision for the next time in November 2021.
Right. Thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments so far? All right. Seeing none, we can proceed.
So
Good
with
morning.
that, I'll turn it over to Cindy.
Pradeep, I think actually this next slide is yours.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about it. So you will see that we're in attachment one, we are proposing a three-phased approach, and that phased approach is spread over the next 18 months. And it's tied to the CalPADS collection and reporting cycles. And it's also tied to the progress and development of the career indicates in the college and career indicator. So basically, as data becomes available to the CT, to our data divisions, and then we can validate that that data. The staff, both in the data division and within CCTD, the Korean College Transition Division, will be able to sort of present to you several pieces of that data as we move forward. And the focus of that attachment is to look at the metrics that are outlined both in the CTEIG legislation as well as the K-12 Strong Workforce legislation. So with that, Cindy, thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Of course. Thank you, Pradeep, for the invitation. And just again, to introduce myself for those of you who I've not met before, I'm Cindy Cazanes. I'm the Director of the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division. I'm joined today by Jonathan Eisler from our Data Visualization and Reporting Office, and also from a different division, the division that collects our data and is responsible for our student level data system, CalPADS. I'm joined today also by Glenn Miller and Paula Mishima. It takes an incredible team to pull this together and to support programs like CTE. I just want to thank Pradeep. He's been a very proactive leader. He's got a great team with Michelle and Peter Callis in trying to really figure out how can we support this work a little better. I wanted to start off with describing at a state level what is going on around data and a very big movement that this governor put forward this last year with the Cradle to Career data system. We're going to then go into an overview of the data sharing agreements and data exchanges that we currently have with the community college system. So Jonathan Eisler will pick it up then, and then we'll close out by what we've been working on in CalPADS. And again, we have the right people on the call to answer your questions today, and happy to take them towards, as we're done with our slides. We don't have that many slides today. So I'm thrilled just to get started that this governor, that Governor Newsom has been very supportive of thinking about things from a holistic standpoint in terms of data. We have struggled with having these onesie, twosie data sharing agreements between the segments of higher education, and with the governor's Cradle to Career data system, I think we'll finally see the light at the end of the tunnel to bring some uniformity around this, but also some transparency, sort of a one-stop shop on things that relate to student outcomes from literally cradle to their career. So just to go through what we've been doing, there's been over 50 meetings. We have a team at the department of about 24 people. Several of us are formally appointed to the work group. Others have these subgroup appointments. So it's been pretty intensive this last year in 2020 to really figure out and follow through on the planning process. This planning process is overseen by the governor's office. WestEd has been brought on as the contractor to provide logistics, planning support, and really the keeping us on task. They've done a great job under Kathy Booth's leadership, and they're scheduled to continue that work through June of 2021. The partner entities include well over a dozen state agencies, including, of course, all of our segments of higher education, workforce development. You have our CDE's contractor, which is CSIS, California Student Information Systems or Services, which is out of Kern County on the represented, as well as the Association of Independent Colleges. So it's a very broad space. What we don't have yet, and I hope that this is far beyond us, but is on the justice side. So thinking about it from how do maybe students go a different direction and end up in our prison system. But the focus for the first phase is on education. So we are all hands on deck. We've been working closely, again, with all the partner agencies to make sure that this is available. So the full year's worth of work, you can look at it in the legislative report that is in that last bullet on the slide. It's a very easy read, but it's also is the platform for moving forward for this year. Next slide, please. So this is a question we get asked often. What's the why behind it? What would the data system allow a California to do? First, of course, it's identifying, sharing, and strengthening factors that make us or look for critical milestones. So again, looking at those pipelines. Early ed will be in phase 2 most likely because of their data sets not being as robust as ours are. But definitely the K-12 to higher ed link is really that first phase. The goal also is to work together to improve equitable outcomes for individuals, families, and communities. And these words were very deliberated on. So they are what you see on the screen are actually things that were included in the legislative report that I wanted to make sure I used the language that we are using collectively. The data system should also be able to provide actionable, reliable information so that what a student identifies as in one system is the same as the other system. We're calling these data elements by the same names. We have a uniform definition behind it, and so there's been actually a whole committee dedicated to just definitions. And then finally, the data system should offer support to make data-driven decision makings, right? This is the whole purpose, to help our policymakers, to help our community members really focus on areas of best practices, but also areas of improvement. Next slide. So a couple weeks back when the governor released his budget, his proposed budget rather for 2021, so again, effective July 1, he's proposing to, again, get this off the ground to provide $15 million to establish an office within Government Operations Agency, which of course is under the authority of the governor's office. What that would allow for is to really stand up the system on the technical side, so data storage, software that's needed. It would also provide for oversight of the system, so on the security side, again on the technical pieces. It does provide some money for the first time in a long time to provide updates to CalPads. So we are really excited about the opportunities there. As well as looking to expand the e-transcript functionality to additional colleges, universities. And then finally, for each of the higher ed segments, it proposes hiring a management level staff or management level data system coordinator. So that is something that the segments have identified as a need, and this proposes funding that need. There is not yet a vehicle for this. I believe trailer bill should be out soon related to this, but also there may be a member of the legislature will be carrying a bill as well to put this into place. Next slide. Additionally, the proposed budget also looks at expanding the work that the California Career Guidance Initiative, or CCGI, has been doing for the last, I think, 2 decades, really. And as you probably all know that have worked with CCGI, they provide an interface for student-level data between high schools and making sure that those information is there so colleges can make decisions on how to best meet the needs of a student that's coming into their segment. So that is a specific standalone budget piece as far as the college career system is considered. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it at this time over to Jonathan Eisler.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. Hopefully, can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So thank you again for the invitation to come speak and meet with you all this morning. Thank you, Pradeep, So I'm going to talk through what some of our data sharing agreements have been with the Chancellor's Office Community Colleges. I'm Jonathan Eisler. I am an administrator for the Data Visualization Reporting Office in the Accountability Division, so I work directly with Cindy. And I would just repeat kind of one of the things that Cindy started off with saying about we're very excited about the Cradle to Career system kind of supplementing or taking over some of these quote-unquote onesie-twosie data sharing agreements. I will say that for the past 5 to 6 years, one of my main jobs has been putting together these onesie-twosie agreements. They're a lot of work, but we've also seen quite a bit of payoff. We've created data sharing agreements not only with community colleges, but with multiple UCs, CSUs, other state agencies. So it's very exciting to be in the place where we are now, where we're getting support across the state to be able to link these data sets across systems. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of repeat the importance of the Cradle to Career, but also the importance in the meanwhile of putting together these onesie-twosies. So I'm going to talk through a couple of these agreements that we have worked on for the past several years. I've had the good fortune of being the lead at CDE of helping put together and negotiate some of these agreements. And really with community colleges, we've had kind of this tiered approach or strategy. So if you look back to early 2017, we worked together on initial data sharing agreement, which really was very simple on the face of it, although it did take a while to hammer down all of the details. And that was to kind of open the door between CalPADS and the CCC Apply system. So we've actually created an agreement that allowed the community colleges CCC Apply system to ping against our records in CalPADS to look up students. And really that opening the door process was the necessary kind of technical first step to be able to start matching more complex data between systems. And not surprisingly, because you have multiple systems in place here, there are some not only technical but legal things that we needed to make sure to do that we're following all privacy laws, following all state and federal guidance, et cetera. So this was very important because what it did was the Community Colleges Board of Governors Task Force on Workforce, Job Creation, and Strong Economy, they were looking at connecting all K-12 student data across our system into their system, and then also being able to connect that data with other post-secondary systems so that we could actually link to workforce outcomes. Because again, prior to this, there had been no connection really at all, at least within our purview of connecting K-12 data, not only with post-secondary data, but even going beyond to workforce data. So we knew we had to open this door first before we could go on to any further more involved and more complicated data sharing. Next slide, please. Okay, so building on the success of the earlier CCC Apply project, we then worked very closely over a year and a half or so with community colleges on the Multiple Measures project. So many of you may remember that Assembly Bill 705 was passed that required community colleges to use multiple measures to place students in mathematics and English courses across their community colleges. And so we worked very closely leveraging our connection with the CCC Apply and leveraging the use of the unique student identifiers from the CalPADS system to be able to provide this data, this course data, to community colleges to be able to better place students in these math and English courses. And we're still working through some of the technical issues involved with an automatic data sharing API, but that is basically an in-process project to supplement an original data sharing that we did as part of the Multiple Measures project. And again, what's nice about this is that besides providing a one-time data match across a large group of students between CalPADS system and the community colleges system, is working together, both of our technical teams meeting every couple of weeks, which we've been doing for the last several months, to be able to make sure that this data match can happen in as real time as possible. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, you can see that this is kind of a building process where we started with the more basic, working our way up to a little bit more complex. And now, as all of you know, the K-12 Strong Workforce Program and the CTEIG programs also require data matching between systems. And so we are right now working very closely with community colleges, again, meeting regularly with their key staff on working out some of the details of what data elements and what requirements they need to be able to learn more about their projects, in particular the K-12 Strong Workforce and the CTEIG projects, to see how they can measure the effectiveness of those programs within the state of California. So that's, again, building upon that original CCC Apply project and then building upon the development of data sharing for the multiple measures project as well. Next slide, please. So really, and this kind of alludes back to something Pradeep had said earlier, as well as Cindy, it really does take a village. It's not just our division or our unit. It's multiple, it's dozens of people within our agency, dozens of people within community colleges working together on this. So it's not just the data divisions. There are a bunch of other work that is being done within the department to make sure that this is happening. So obviously, one of the things we're most interested not only in the reporting out of data, but how is the data collected for the CTE data? Is there uniformity? Is there conformity of the data coming into our system so that it's more useful for both our program purposes and also for the purposes of being shared with community colleges? And really, there's many divisions that they're not even listed here that are involved in this process, but really the most important, obviously the Career and College Transition Division, which is headed by Pradeep, our division, just the Analysis, Measurement, Accountability Reporting Division, the Educational Data Management Division. I know many of the people from that division are on the call today. And then we also have multiple people from our IT shop or our Technology Services Division. And again, they're working very hard closely with the community colleges counterparts on the API to make sure that the real-time data is being exchanged. So again, it really does take a large group of people with different expertise, different backgrounds, and kind of regular communication between us internally and with community colleges as well. So I'm going to, next slide, I think hand it back to Cindy.
Yes, and I'm going to cover this slide. Thank you, Jonathan. And then I'm going to ask Paula Mishima to jump in. I think there were some points that I may have lost that didn't get added to this slide. So one of the other questions or topics that Pradeep asked us to cover is around the collection process for data, because of course Jonathan and I are dealing with the output of data in our data reporting side, but the input of data is very important as well. And so part of when we first started CalPADS, of course, CalPADS was really started in response to requirements under the No Child Left Behind to show that we had a 4-year adjusted cohort, so we could determine who was graduating in a 4-year within 4 years and those that took longer. And so the longitudinal pieces of this allow for us to also show program participation like CTE and such. And so we've been working for the last probably 10 years around how can we help CTE data be more robust. And we've learned from our other program experiences to make sure that the system is being structured in a way that is helpful for the data collection process. So as you all know, this is your work, but Perkins 5 and then the K-12 SWP and the CTEIG all require LEAs to survey CTE completers 6 months after they've left secondary education to gather, of course, post-secondary outcomes. And this data collection process relies on surveys, which are not necessarily reliable, or you don't necessarily get 100% of responses. And we know that it's labor intensive for our districts, and so we are working towards bringing this into CalPADS. And Paula, if you mind picking up here and talking about what you all have been working on the CalPADS side.
Sure. Hi, this is Paula Mishima. First, I just wanted to say that, Cindy talked a lot about the Cradle to Career data system, and that system will eventually provide more comprehensive and quality outcome data when all the data that are currently gathered by survey is available via data linkage, particularly enrollment in post-secondary institutions, employment, and potentially other outcome data, for example, certifications and licensees, as these other entities become part of the system. But in the meantime, we have to rely on the survey data. The CDE has consolidated the collection of post-secondary outcome data required for Perkins 5 K-12 strong workforce and CTEIG into CalPADS this year. In fact, LEAs are currently in the process of surveying students and will submit that consolidated data for the first time as part of the CalPADS Fall 2 submission, which is actually happening right now. And that submission ends in early March 2021. So it will be the first time we hopefully will have a little bit more comprehensive data, because the LEAs are collecting it and submitting it to the department just through CalPADS. Last year, they had to submit it through a couple vehicles, and the response rate wasn't that great. I think Pradeep's folks could speak to that, but hopefully we're moving towards getting better data, and once Cradle to Career is in place, we should have definitely much more robust data.
Next slide, which I believe is opening this up for questions. Oh, Paula, I think this is it just covered. Yeah,
was missing.
I know it was missing in my slide deck, so I apologize. Paula okay. just covered these pieces. So the final slide, yes. So we can turn it back over to the chair.
All right, thank you for that. A lot of great info, and I know the Cradle to Career data system is a concept that other governors and leaders have kind of dreamed about but never really successfully implemented, and I'm really looking forward to us finally doing it under Governor Newsom. I think it's going to be really transformative for building a responsive and data-informed government. So I think that's great. So thank you all for your work on that. I do see a couple of questions, and let's start with Member Rucker.
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I'm so excited to see this work happening both among the divisions and among the multiple organizations and entities that have statewide data about the students participating in these various programs. I think as we proceed forward, and especially since this work is going to inform going forward how we view the information we learn about the CTEIG grants and other programs that are the responsibility of this panel, I think it's important to also understand, while you all are looking at what are the common data points that your data systems collect, and also understanding the differences in how you go about collecting and sourcing the information that shows up in all of the fields in your data reports. I think the other concern that needs to be looked at is the priority or purpose for why the data is being collected. For example, with Perkins in particular, while the intent of the data being collected is to identify access and who the students are that are accessing programs, the accountability is about improving that access and also improving the academic and educational outcomes for those students. And so but at the same time, there's also an issue about disparity that also is pointed out by the data that's collected for the Perkins plan and for the reports that ultimately go to the legislature. So I'm not sure for all the data systems and a lot of the collaborative data work you're doing, for many of the data systems, looking at collecting data or presenting the data reports to highlight or point out issues of disparity among those student groups is not necessarily the priority. So I do have a concern as this work goes forward that we have some clear intent on what the outcomes from the reporting will be, so that there is not a mission drift among some of the programs that detracts from the work that was intended, and in particular the work that was intended by this panel. I hope that makes sense.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, Member Rucker? I think, well, you're used to seeing me talk about the California School Dashboard, which of course is the big A accountability, but it seems to me like you're suggesting that the work that you're doing for this joint work group is more reporting out on you mentioned access and who the students are. So simply reporting out for transparency purposes. But there's also some clear purposes that you all need to do to meet federal statutes. I just want to make sure that am I understanding you correctly?
Yes. For some of the people who've been on this panel for a while, you may recall that I had raised some particular objections about how we were reporting student performance and what the minimum performance levels were going to be as outcomes on the state assessments for purposes of this program. And Dr. Kotaraju made it clear that there was a reason and a rationale behind what those program performance differences as reported for Perkins would be that are very different for the purposes of what we're reporting in our state accountability system. So it took a while for us to come to an agreement, not only about what that data meant, but what that data was going to be representing. I see Dr. Kotaraju acknowledging and recalling those particular conversations. And so, yes, Cindy, that's the point that I'm bringing up. There's a difference between big A accountability, as we talk about with regard to the dashboard, and little a accountability about what we're required to report for purposes of reporting program outcomes. And I just want to make sure, because as the work goes forward to try to consolidate, what we're reporting and looking for in the data systems, that we don't lose that important distinction about reporting on and looking at and understanding disparity and how that can be reported as well.
So Member Rucker, to follow up on what Cindy said, I think, as you will see from later on in this presentation, will be some information about some of the groups that you're talking about and the differences that are emerging. What we have done is, with the help of all of the divisions that are working within CDE, is to sort of first and foremost say that we will be collecting CTE data from all of the LEAs. So that is sort of the focus that we will be looking at. So regardless, any LEA that is offering CTE, they will be inputting the data into CalPADS. And then it is our responsibility to look at that data and try to meet the accountability and continuous improvement requirements that are necessary under the federal and state programs. So rather than say this data is being collected for CTEIG and this data is being collected for Perkins, we're just saying if you're offering CTE at the LEA level, we would like you to enter this data and in this form, and these are the types of data you should be entering.
I understand. Thank you very much.
All right. Next, we have Vice Chair Sun.
Sorry, I had to take myself off of mute. Yeah, thank you, Cindy and Jonathan and Paula, for coming in and presenting today. I'm also, like my colleague, Member Rucker, I'm very excited about the expansion of the data and this collaboration between divisions. I think maybe part of what Member Rucker was alluding to was what we want to make sure that as we're expanding the data system and collecting this information, that we want the data system to align to our policy and not our policy to align to what data we collect. And I will give you two very specific examples that's kind of come my way because in one, for instance, in our policy and in our Perkins application, we have talked about expanding CTE pathways down into middle school and even starting something in the elementary. Right now, as I understand it, that in CalPADS reporting, you can only designate a CTE course if it is a high school course. So if we're not able to, if our policy is that we want to expand down, we should expand our data system to allow schools that may be offering the very initial beginnings of a couple of intro classes into a CTE pathway should be able to allow something like that. So
If I can just provide a little bit more information, this is Paula. Actually, LEAs can submit departmentalized CTE courses down into middle school, even further down than that. It really depends on the school district and whether or not they have departmentalized their courses. But I do believe currently we do get departmentalized courses for middle school and junior high. And if they are offering CTE courses, they would be submitting those.
My understanding is that there was an attempt to do that, and they were told that they if it's a middle school course, even if it's a it's a middle school course, it cannot be counted towards CTE.
Oh, that's a different question. So they could submit the data. We do have the data. It's more of an accountability question in terms of whether or not those courses are counted in the college and career indicator, which is only done for high school kids. So we do have the data. It's a matter, I think, of how the data is used.
I don't necessarily want to get into all the technical, but I'm just trying to give an example. And so then the consequences of not being able to check off the box of it being a CTE course because there isn't a box to check off as it's middle school, then have implications for the credential and who can teach that course. So there's just a lot of different implications, when we have these data systems and there are only specific boxes. So I just want us to just be aware of that in looking at, as we're creating this, that we are creating data systems and expanding data systems that align with policy and not the other way around. And if that is the case, I think that to help with that would be some mechanism with the new funds that may be coming in of bringing in maybe practitioners and people in the field to provide input as we're expanding this, and particularly in the CTE area, because we haven't done a good job of collecting information and longitudinal data. And so this would be a little bit new. And it seems that we should probably have folks who are in the field who are actually doing and making inputs into the system, be able to provide some mechanism for them to be able to talk about that.
Could I just make one other comment? The one thing that does make data collection and understanding that data for CTE particularly hard is that the pathways are not standardized, meaning from one school or LEA to another, they have different number of courses that are required to meet a particular pathway. And so that is one area that we've found to be really difficult in trying to standardize the collection of this data or really understand it. So I just wanted to bring that point up.
Right, and I understand that. So with the systems, we would start standardizing, and as we start standardizing, we start locking in. So I think, again, looking at, it's very true, LEAs have different ways. There isn't a standard way to do it. And I think we're okay with that unless we want to start implementing laws and all that to standardize it. But as long as they're able to meet the needs of their local and regional needs through programs, then we should have a system that collects that information rather than build the system and say, we'll fit into it.
That's really helpful. And I think to your point, Member Sun, about bringing in stakeholders, we've had a very robust input cycle because of the college career indicator from this community as well. And so we can definitely, work with Pradeep as needed to leverage that existing group or bring in new voices. But we have, we know that the CTE community isn't afraid to share their thoughts and ideas about how we can improve things. That is something that is we've always been it's always been a nice working relationship, and definitely critical friends make the system much better. And I think we definitely see that with the college career indicator. We've seen that reflected there.
Thank you.
That is good to hear. We have a lot of great outspoken folks. Next is ex officio member Rattray.
Hi, Nice to see you, Cindy, and thank you for presenting to us and your colleagues. And I had the privilege of serving on one of the Cradle to Career committees. I was on the practice and advisory, and trying to represent, in some sense, this committee and some of the things we've all worked on for over the years, trying to put the and in Cradle, in career and college ready, or college and career ready. And so, you know, I just want to reflect on the things we know well. Many of us have been fighting forever, it seems like, on trying to inject more creative ways to integrate the academic kind of A to G environment into a CTE and vice versa, and then be able to capture it better. And of course, our school board, our state board president, Linda Darling-Hammond, as we all know, has been one of the leaders in authentic assessments and portfolios and different ways of showing student success in high school and other levels outside of the traditional measures. And so I just say that, you know, work-based learning being another example too, is we don't have a very good way of tracking work-based learning, but we all know it's valuable and we'd like to. So I just, with all that to say, I'm excited that we have this larger framework and we have a governor that's advocating for it and providing resources to help you improve what you've been doing with very minimal resources. And I would just encourage you to be as ambitious as possible at this moment because of that. Be creative and innovative, because there's been things we've been trying to do for over a decade that we all couldn't, even though we knew they would be good. This is a big door that's opened, or at least somewhat. And I just hope we're very aggressive about it. And our principles, the guiding principles this committee came up with, would be a good thing to refer to as you sort of think about what we think that would really advance data systems to support better career education in California. So anyway, that's mostly just a comment. You don't need to respond. I very much admire the work you've been doing, and I'm very supportive.
Thank you. I just actually wanted to share some good news. I think in part due to the college career indicator work, we have been able to come up with a working definition around work-based learning, and we are starting to collect that this year for the first time. So really the Big A accountability has helped drive some of these practices, but definitely the work of Pradeep's division will help to refine them moving forward.
That is great.
So Member Rattray, to piggyback on what Cindy said, besides the work that Cindy alluded to, we are also within my division looking at work-based learning, because as you know, you've asked us questions on work-based learning, and given the new environment of virtual work-based learning, how do we sort of look at that back to Vice Chair Sun's point about essentially looking at things and not having policy drive the data, but not having data drive the policy, but policy driving the data. And work-based learning has become not only the federal programs, but also in the state programs in terms of using some of those funds for that. So we are internally trying to look at the policy aspects. How do you define work-based learning? You know, who gets involved? All those kinds of things, and we'll collaborate with Cindy and with the CCI group, and so that's something that we will be working towards. Although we did not, under the Perkins legislation, use as our quality indicator work-based learning, we used in short form, basically college-going courses. California is participating in a nationwide project on that work-based learning indicator, and Jenny Singh from Cindy's group is part of that team and working with the program folks so that we can get a better understanding of not only how other states define and use work-based and measure work-based learning, but how we can move forward in California.
It's all very good. So next we have Member Grande.
Thank you, Chair Rawlings. I was just wondering how we've migrated or been able to migrate the data from the K-12 into the community college system to get closer to the career aspect of that cradle to career data. And where are we, or how can the Board of Governors help facilitate any of that data transfer between the K-12 over into the community colleges? So we might get a little bit more information about how successful our programs are, especially dual enrollment type programs, in terms of, accelerating the pace at which our K-12 students are getting into the community college programs and then getting out into that career. I don't know if Dr. Karamaju might answer it, or another presenter. What can we do to help facilitate that?
So I think it would be helpful, because I think Jonathan Eisler from my staff walked through what data is already being given to community colleges. Perhaps Ms. Sanchez would be willing to talk about how it's being used, because we have a data sharing agreement, but we're not, we don't work for the Chancellor's office, and I can't tell you on a day-to-day basis what's being done there.
And maybe even reframing a little bit, if we need to, about where are the pressure points that we might have in expanding and making sure that we're getting good data in, good data out across the data sharing agreements.
If I may, this is Shani Webb. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Workforce and Economic Development. Unfortunately, Sandra had a family emergency and had to step away. So I think, the MOU that was developed a couple years ago with the Chancellor's Office is very specific to two different projects, and the data is specific to the multiple assessment data and looking at that piece of it. I think where it's critical for us to be able to do analysis on is around the K-12 strong workforce data. And that MOU needs to be in place for us to do any kind of analysis, because it will give us the data that we need to do that analysis. And I think currently the work is sort of in discussion. I think we are awaiting responses regarding the metrics and what metrics could be shared with us in order to move the MOU forward. And we hope that we will be able to get to putting the MOU in place as soon as possible to obtain the data that's needed for that analysis. So we were hoping in being able to just amend the existing MOU that took a couple of years to put in place. But the agreement that we came to was to create a new MOU for the strong workforce. So the metrics still has to be agreed upon before that could be moved forward. So we're hoping that would be put in place as soon as possible to allow this work to be done.
Thank you very much for that response, Vice Chancellor Weber. So at what point in time will we ever have a complete set of data that tells us where they started and where they ultimately ended, and how successful we've been as a system, secondary, post-secondary, getting them from cradle to career?
So the system is definitely, first of all, it has to be funded so we can actually stand up the system to do that work. But as I mentioned, the higher ed segments in K-12 are in the first phase. So we are actually involved in a pilot with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing to see if the ping points in the CSU system, to see if the ping points that we've developed in this proposal actually work, the legal pieces, the security pieces, the data definitions, and so on. And so that is testing the system. That pilot is supposed to be completed by the end of June of this year. So it's a very aggressive timeline to roll this out. I don't have the legislative report in front of me. It will take, a couple of years to definitely, I think, get to where you're at. If we're only starting with K-12 and the higher ed segments, you're not going to get necessarily to workforce, right? So EDD is not in the first phase, but we will be able to see, at least on the college side, those progressions.
Thank you so much. I hope that with enough resources allocated, we might ultimately be able to show the good work that we are doing so that it continues the foundational funding that's necessary for all of our career education programs.
I concur. I think this is a lot of really critical work, really important work, and it's a lot we can learn from. Learn what we're doing well and what we're not doing so well, and being able to just have an iterative process of improvement. So I think it's wonderful. Are there any other comments or questions from members? Seeing none, I will open it up for any public comments. I do see one. I do know that there is a little bit of a lag, as I mentioned before. So if you have an additional comment that you have not typed in yet, go ahead and get started on that. And I do see that we have a question, I think, from a member of the public.
Chair Rawlings, I'm not sure we're done with this agenda item.
Oh, okay. Then let's continue.
It reverts back to me presenting you with some sort of starting point information of data that we've collected in the last couple of months, and this is in response to some of the queries that we've been having from the members, particularly at the last meeting, but even prior to that. So you have in front as two attachments there, one for attachment for CTE participants and one for CTE completers. And so you have a set of 24 tables and corresponding charts for the participant and 24 tables and charts for the CTE completer. So we received from a March Cindy's division a data set for the fiscal year 2018-19 cohort for 562 LEAs that offered CTE. Yeah, the data set applied the definitions for a CTE participant and CTE completer that you had approved in the Perkins 5-state plan. And so in order to do this analysis and data reporting, we needed a starting point, and we used that definition in that where a CTE participant is someone that takes at least one CTE course, and CTE completer is someone who completes 300 hours of coursework and in a pathway, and essentially gets a C- in the capstone course. So it's a very specific definitions that you approved for the secondary CTE participant and CTE completer as outlined in the Perkins 5-state plan. We then went ahead and assigned to those 562 LEAs the CDS, or county district school codes, to those LEAs that receive state and federal funding. So what you will see as in a moment, you will see several LEAs that receive either those funding, the state and federal CT funding singly, that is, they only go for one or the other, or in more likely the case, it's a combination. We also obtained information of CTE participation and completion by gender, race, ethnicity, and special populations. Once again, the special populations as defined both in the Perkins 5-state plan that we discussed when we went through having you approve the Perkins 5-state plan. The special populations definitions are in the Perkins law. and we use those same definitions, and we worked with our data divisions to make sure that going forward, these are the data, these are the special populations that will be collected, because in this particular area in special populations, there's a market change from what we were collecting for special populations in prior federal legislation and now under Perkins 5. While I know that we do not want the federal program driving our decision-making process, the law itself is quite clear in how some of these items are defined. And in order to do this reporting and analysis, we needed a starting point, and that's what I used to move forward. In attachment 1, you will see other definitions of a participant and completion that we could look at, but that would require a little more analysis in terms of doing that, and we will probably work through that and in subsequent presentations. The last thing I would say here is that we use the FY 2018-19 cohort is because that data has been validated, and the 1920 cohort is the CalPAS division is looking through that and validating that information, but I'm sure we can have that pretty soon. And we would have, once we get 1920 as well, we would have some sort of comparative information between the 2 years. Next slide. So I just wanted to highlight some caveats in this reporting and analysis. The CDS codes were used to determine funding. So it was the 2018-19 CDS codes were used for, excuse me, was used, but CT participation and completion was for the entire 2018-19 cohort. So essentially starting from academic year 2015-16 and going all the way to 2018-19. So anytime they took CTE in that 4-year cohort, we were able to sort of collect information on that, whether they were participant or a completer. Then the second thing you should note that 2018-19 was the first year the K-12 Strong Workforce funding was made available for funding and granting. And so while just for having a common platform for reporting, we separated out the K-12 Strong Workforce funding, both either singly or in combination. I think we should look at that data with some caution, and then maybe as we get more data in subsequent years, we can say much more forcefully or more clearly about the impact on CT participation and completion. The Perkins 5 funding was included in the analysis because for both CTEIG and that we have considered for the match for state CT funding for CTEIG and K-12 Strong Workforce. And as I said before, the preciseness of these Perkins 5 definition of CT, participant, and completer was useful in obtaining consistent information across the 3 programs. Next slide, please. So the results are presented in the following way. You have 2 sets of tables and charts, one for CT participants and one for CT completers, broken out by gender, race and ethnicity, and special populations. Observations, and the way I think you will have a lot of questions, I'm sure, but I just wanted to give what I would call meta observations from looking at those 48 charts and give you some sense of at least what we have observed in looking at that data. So the observation are summarized differently based on LEAs using a single source of funding or a combination of the funding source. And interestingly, when we looked at the data, there were 115 LEAs that offered CTE but were not using either state or federal funding. And a good question to ask is why, even though they were offering CTE, a good question to ask is why. I can speak not just for California, but this is true nationally. We often hear from LEAs that basically say they find, particularly this medium to small school districts, find that the requirements under Perkins particularly onerous in some sense, and I think so. Particularly when Perkins is based on an allocation formula and it is not a competitive grant, and the amounts that each NLEA might get would be small. So I think it's interesting too, and we'll probably have to investigate that as we go forward. And we provide additional observations that are relevant and pertinent. Next slide, please. So high CT participant within the cohort. So one of the percentages there in the participation chart is essentially how many of those in the cohort were taking at least one CTE course, and the conversion rate or CT participant within the cohort is high. It was about 3 out of 4, basically, roughly, in terms of take at least one CT course. In terms of going from a participant to a completer, I would argue it showed that it was 1 in 5. So clearly there's something when you go from a participant to a completer that's there. And I think part of the requirement is keep in mind that CTE is an elective, and it is not required. It is required in some analysis I did a few years ago. We looked at the academic requirements within school district across the nation, and we were looking, and if you look at it as 28 Carnegie credits, 28 to 32 Carnegie credits, and this was in the No Child Left Behind era. It was about 16 credits for meeting those academic requirements, somewhere between 12 and 16. So you have 16 credits in some sense that is all of the electives that are included in that has CT and things like music and band and everything else within that. And so there is a sense in terms of CT, being an elective of CT may contribute to something there. And the other thing one could argue here is that in some schools they may only be offering just a couple of CT courses in a pathway and cannot complete that pathway. So again, as I said, these are meta observations. More work needs to be done into that, and that conversion rate I just talked about apply to gender, race, ethnicity, and special population breakdown as well. There's a more even in CT participation, CT completion rate when it comes to gender. There's a little higher in terms of male and female, but it's more variable when it comes to race and ethnicity and special population. So we can explore that a little later. So the interesting, what I noticed reviewing the data was conversion rates rise as LEAs are able to access CTE, state or federal grant funding, and then access multiple sources of state and federal grant funding. So it's interesting to note that, and that if you want to think about those 115 LEAs that don't have any of these fundings at the control group, it might be a way to do some further analysis, but that requires some high-level statistical analysis that would require a little more intensity and time. So targeting CTE participant and CTE completion for specific race and ethnicity and special population categories tends to smooth out when LEAs use CTE funding from multiple sources. So while there's a lot more variability when there is no funding sources, it tends to smooth out. So while I won't go so far as drawing the implication that these are the programs that are helping out, but they could be a contributing factor in terms of smoothing out that participation and completion. Next slide. So again, targeting CT participation for specific race and ethnicity and special population categories is relatively high in percentage terms when LEAs use CTEIG funding. That is something that I noticed that, in fact, when you look at the combination of CTEIG funding by itself, that percentage was high. It was around maybe in the high 70s, but while not that different, when it was in combination with either Perkins by itself or Perkins in combination with CTEIG, I noticed that was a little lower, in the lower 70s or higher 60s. So that's something that maybe it's a question of awareness of CTEIG as opposed to Perkins would be a contributing factor. But again, as I said, these are initial observations, and we need to look further into some of these nuances that I'm referring to. Within special population categories, the emphasis on those LEAs targeted when using federal Perkins funds required under previous iterations of the law. So basically what this bullet says is that as you look at this, as I said before, the special population categories have been expanded a lot more under Perkins 5 than was under Perkins 4, and that actually that applies also to the state programs, because at the LEA level, familiarity with special population often meant these three categories that I talked about: English learners, individual students with disabilities, and individuals from economically disadvantaged families. These were the ones that we considered that were considered as special population under previous iterations of Perkins. And so maybe there's a sort of they're ahead of the game with these special population categories, and they would need to work more on the others listed under those special population categories. One thing to note is, as you look at the charts, I found it interesting that homeless students also showed up in terms of that, and that would be something clearly it is a focus of policy interest within the state of California. It's something that we do, and it opens up the question about how those students can be helped through CTE programming. Next slide, please. So what are our next steps? We are going to follow through on the timeline specified in the attachment 1. One thing I will put the proviso out here is, of course, it's subject to all of the things that are happening around COVID-19 in terms of our data collection. One of the questions is to look at, I know one of the interests that you have in looking at is assessment data, how we can collect that information this year, and given sort of variations in terms of how that assessment data might be collected is something that we have to explore in terms of that. Well, as we go through the process, we will be getting, as Paula talked about earlier, we will getting more data. We will getting an additional fiscal year, and so we could build out, in some sense, both refine attachments 2 and 3, and we can start building out the output and outcomes data. So, for example, things like high school graduation or things like assessment scores. And as Paula talked about, the post-secondary data, what are they doing 6 months after they leave high school? And so we could get that kind of information. And again, a lot of this is contingent upon the discussions that Cindy alluded to earlier about the career indicators within the CCI and collecting that information. More likely, we will be getting some information about work-based learning next calendar year. And then, but the other piece of information that is interest from a policy perspective are industry-based certifications, and how do we include those within the career portion of the career and college indicators. So we are having continued discussion between program and the data divisions within CTEIG. This is an ongoing discussion that we have. In response to some of your questions that you raised in previous meetings, we are looking more thoroughly and trying to systematize that collection of data, and then essentially, hopefully, we will have. Again, my earlier remark to Member Rucker, we would have a CTE data collection from which we can say things about each of those programs. The one thing I would have to caveat that I didn't include there, but I would note for you to you is that we still cannot attribute a particular funding source to a student, because it is the LEA that gets the funding source. So we can say that the LEA high school graduation rate increased, but whether that was because of CTEIG or K-12 strong workforce or Perkins, we cannot or if that's students' high school graduation, we cannot make that attribution. And so it is still, this analysis that we just presented to you is still at the LEA level, and we can say something about through those special population categories. One of the things that we do have data right now is on industry sectors. I think there was a question raised earlier about a breakdown by the different industry sectors. We do have that data, and we will process that data and provide that to you either next time or in May. Next slide. So I'll stop here. I mean, I had one of two options here. I could have gone through chart by chart, table by table, and gone through 48 of them, but I'm sure you did not want me to do that. So that's why I gave you this meta observations, and hopefully you have some specific questions about those tables and charts as in the member comments.
All right. So I'm going to lead off with one or two questions here. First is kind of going back a little bit. I was wondering, I was thinking about different collaborations, and I was wondering about the data sharing agreements, particularly around strong workforce, and if we have timetables that might be completed.
Are you talking about the K-12 strong workforce, or are you talking about the strong workforce? Yeah, I mean, as I don't know if Cindy and Jonathan are still online, but I think we are having that conversation, and as the one thing to note is that for K-12 strong workforce and CTEIG, the population from which this data is extracted is the same. It's really the high school population. So it actually rests on our CDE side. So what we have to sort of, as Shani was talking about earlier, is to talk about how do we relate it to the outcomes that we need and that are in the legislation, and provide that information to that through this agreement. I'm hoping it's this year. I mean, I think we're trying very hard to get that in place, as Shani said, as soon as possible in terms of sharing that data.
And you said this year is this academic year or this calendar?
Yeah, no. Let me be safe and say this calendar year.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. And then second question, more along the lines of equity and those kinds of issues. I recall when we had the presentation from JSPAC, the Joint Special Populations Advisory Committee. I'm wondering how much dialogue we're having with them still, and especially when we take a look at some of this data, are they able to give any insights to us on what their experience is on the ground?
we haven't talked to them, but as I think Vice Chair Sun talked about earlier, is to not only the group that Cindy was talking about, our internal sort of advisory group, but also going out to the field and talk to various stakeholders about this data. I think it's a discussion we need to have within both the CCTD. I actually follow the lead of our data divisions, because if you notice very closely on the data, this is statewide data. And when you try and provide this disaggregate data by LEA or by region, particularly for those disaggregate data, you run into small numbers. And then you run into issues of reporting and things like that, and then we'd have to sort of redact some of that information that may not make sense to that data. So it's something that I'm working and with our data divisions to make sure that we as a program division don't run afoul to some of the rules that have been set in reporting that data.
Got it.
But let me also say, in terms of, so I think once we get this, I think JSPAC would be one a group that we would like to get in contact with and talk to them, because they are in a better position to do outreach to their to
right.
people interested in there. And so I think there will be one. And thank you for pointing that out, because they will be a good partner in all of this.
Yeah, my thought there was, especially when we take a look at how there's a little less discrepancy as far as gender outcomes and participation, and there's a greater outcome when it comes to race, ethnicity. I'd be interested in seeing some more of that data about race, ethnicity, and then also how that that data is reflected regionally, right? So digging into some of those charts would be a little helpful. But let's jump over to Member Grande.
Thank you, Chair Rawlings. And thank you, Dr. Katam-Raju, for the amazing tables and the fantastic data. It has led to a number of questions that, first, I hope that you can give me just a little bit more clarification so I can actually ask the question I want to in a concise manner. When we look at a completer being someone who has done 300 hours of career education, what does that equate to in terms of like the number of courses or the number of semesters that a student would have dedicated to obtain those 300 hours?
Michelle, are you on there? Maybe you can answer this question more precisely than I can.
Sure, Pradeep. So the way, my understanding is the way the 300 hours, what we consider 300 hours is the completion of a pathway. Generally, if you think about in K-12 high school terms, you're looking at about an hour a day for 180 days. And then we went with the minimum of that, which I think is 50, can't remember if it was 50 or 55 exactly, but times 180 days, and then times 2 years. So it's really a full year course is what we're looking at, 2 full year courses. So hopefully that makes sense there.
Oh, thank you very much, Michelle. So sure. As Pradeep mentioned, that a majority of the participants in career education are doing it as electives outside of everything else that they need to graduate. So we're asking them essentially to dedicate 2 years of their elective options to get through a pathway, which I think would be appropriate, especially if we can show them with the data that it definitely leads to a career, and then gainful employment would be fantastic on top of that, and even a pathway into a community college would be excellent. But I think this might now allow me to ask the question that I'd really like to know. And if we're looking at those schools that have a lot of participants because they offer 1 or 2 career education type classes, but not the complete pathway, are we making any concessions for that in our K-12 Strong Workforce or CTEIG funding applications that allow them to be given a better standing in terms of application acceptability if they are building a complete program pathway, or if they're engaged in partnering and collaborating with another LEA that might be able to provide the ancillaries that that particular LEA might be lacking? especially as we look at the transitions that have been made through the pandemic this past year. The level of remote instruction has gone up exponentially, and the ability to partner with other LEAs or get LEAs together to partner to create a complete program pathway. I'm just wondering if we're doing everything we possibly can to incentivize that so that we end up with more completers, because I look at the level of participation and it's phenomenal. I'm disappointed with the level of completion as it's currently being reported.
Any thoughts on that?
Excuse me, I haven't lost audio, have I?
No, you're good. You're good, Member Rucker. Yeah, I was wondering if Steph had any comments on Member Grande's question and commentary.
I'm just wondering, is there any consideration that's being made in the application process for K-12 Strong Workforce and CTEIG to help foster the complete pathway so that we get an increased number of completers?
So Member Grande, this is Michelle. And so when we fund the programs in CTEIG, we're funding the overall, their overall CTE programs. And so sometimes they're building new pathways, which could be maybe they have a single course, and so they're adding that second course onto it. And I also failed to mention, excuse me, in my last piece there too, is that when you asked about, the number of courses that folks take, we also have our, excuse me, sorry. We also have our ROP system as well. And, and sometimes you have courses that are 2 hours in length or more sometimes that students will be able to complete. So in that case, a student might actually be able to complete one real full robust course in a year through that 2 to 3 hour course. They also sometimes, I know when I was teaching, I had a pathway that was 2 hours one year and 2 hours the next year. So, but to get back, so just wanted to put that in there so that you understood that as well. That 300 hours is really the minimum that we look at. And then getting back to your other question, we do allow in CTEIG for that growth to take place. And that's what we ask, we have them complete their high quality self-evaluation. What are the areas that they might be building out? What are the areas that they might be changing? And in my presentation earlier, I mentioned we're actually looking to put more specific detail in the application so we know exactly which pathways and programs are being built. So
I appreciate the response. And I just was wondering, is there any movement or could there be any movement to incentivize applications to complete a pathway? Because clearly participation is amazing. There are a ton of LEAs that are making career education courses available, and the students are subscribing to them by sacrificing one of their electives. But are we incentivizing the LEAs to develop the complete pathway?
So let me just jump in there. Paula Nishima put a comment in the chat, and I think we could actually, because we have that information, we could look at LEAs that the students are completing the full pathway and see what they are and how that shakes out in some sense, and maybe find out what are they doing because the constraints are the same for everyone, whether you're small, medium, or large. What is it that they're doing in order for them to have complete pathways, and essentially how are they blending and braiding these funds to sort of use them constructively and proactively. So there is a lot of work. I will say to you that this is work that I did for a long time, and it's something that I don't do that anymore. But in my very younger days, that used to be my homework at night. And there were lots of times when I was running data to try and answer the kinds of questions that are being raised here, and we're still trying to answer those questions. So it's something I truly enjoy, and I wish I had more time to do that. But it's and the questions that are being raised here are a good direction for us to move forward.
The one thing that I would be very hopeful on is if we do find that LEAs are not in a position to offer the complete pathway, might we be able to leverage some of the opportunities in our community colleges to reach down to help complete that pathway through dual enrollment and other initiatives that we currently are embarking on in our community college system? If a particular high school can only offer, one course, but the local community college can offer the subsequent path or the path to completion through all of those dual enrollment opportunities and remote instruction, maybe we can collaborate, work together, and actually get them to completion. I would love to see people leave high school with a job in place that is of a living wage. So as they embark on college and university experiences, they can help fund a portion of the cost of enrollment in higher education.
Member Grande, this is Shani Weber. Just wanted to add regarding the K-12 Strong Workforce applications, we are currently analyzing the initial interim data and looking to any evidence and seeing how we might be able to adjust our RFA to incentivize that. I think initially, with very little data that we have currently, it seems the LEAs are mostly investing in career exploration. And so we do need to figure out how to better incentivize them to, sort of accelerate that process and looking to completion.
That's excellent. Thank you so much.
That's helpful. Yeah.
I know Member Rucker is waiting patiently, but let me also say something. In some of the research that I've done previously, one of the things that I noticed, and this is using national data, is there were several students within, and this goes to your point, Member Grande, is there were several students that we noticed, and we analyzed transcript data, and that there were several students who were taking a single CTE course in healthcare, another one in information technology, another one in business, but they were not counted as part of the pathway because they essentially they were still considered explorers or intensive explorers, but and the data that this is a paper we did in 2014, that was about 3 out of 10 students who were doing that. And so clearly there's nowhere in policy that really addresses that group in terms of how we address that. And I think we have an opportunity in the state programs to look at that. And I think that's where Member Rucker was going to at last time, and maybe she'd like to elaborate more on that.
Member Rucker.
Well, first of all, let me begin by thanking the department staff, Dr. Kodamaraju, for the evident amount of work that you did to put all of these documents and reports together. So this is something I have been asking for a while, and I do appreciate the effort and the initiative and the commitment of time that was done to put all of this information together. And yes, I do appreciate you didn't walk us through it all, because particularly for members of the public who may not have the handouts, be able to scan through, it probably would have been a confusing conversation. And so I'm glad that you took time to make the comment that you just made, because that was going to be a question that I had. There is this focus on CTE concentrators, but we do have a whole other population of students who do more scanning or surveying of CTE courses and programs that may be offered in their LEA. And they may only take one course in the programs that are offered and say, well, let me try something else. And we don't capture either their motivation for how they're participating in CTE or even their overall participation by the end of their high school time. So I think that is something worth studying and looking at. But I do want to turn back to what Commissioner Rollins talked about concerning the role of the JSPAC and looking at what these reports tell us about diversity, because I actually see two stories here. Dr. Kodamaraju, in response to the comment that Member Rollins made, you stated that this is statewide data, and I think I may have misheard, so if I misquote you here, please don't hesitate to correct what I'm saying. You said that as we get to the LEA level or the county and or school site level, the numbers diminish and become so small that they become, and this is my word, not yours, either unimportant or the students disappear. So here's the thing. This is what I mean when I say there's two pieces of, there's two reports here. Statewide, there's a lot of information about participation, the diversity of programs, the diversity of options, as well as the kinds of students and motivations of students who are getting involved in CTE programs and trying to complete. But the second story that's shown clearly here is beyond, when you do more granular analysis and look at the LEA, the county, or even the school side level, the participation, and I'm even going to say, to be provocative, the access that students of color may or may not have to these programs becomes important. Because particularly given the schools and the LEAs that are repeatedly funded in the Strong Workforce Grant or in the CTEIG grant, their populations are pretty static. And students of color are not disappearing from the schools. They're not moving out of state. They're not transferring to other schools or other districts or other programs. They are there, but it doesn't appear the recruitment that should be done to make these programs available, or the work that districts need to do to actively reach out to those students and establish some relevance for students in helping them to make decisions about these programs is not always apparent. And so the recommendation about the role of the JSPAC in going out to talk to districts and recruiting the engagement of districts to talk about diversity, that's one way that the JSPAC as a resource in this department could be used. Let me suggest, and again, I could be wrong, so I'm happy to be corrected. Let me suggest that another role for the JSPAC is to be helpful in interpreting what this data means about the disappearance of diversity at a more granular level, and what that may be suggesting about ways that programs can be accountable when we do successive application cycles, if we are truly trying to hold them accountable, not only for equity of the participation of students as an outcome in exiting these programs, but also equity in the ways that access is provided for these students across these programs and across districts.
I would certainly concur. I don't know if Steph has any comments on there, but I definitely concur there. I know a lot of the work that the California Community Colleges have been doing has been focused around diversity, equity, inclusion, but including that, though, is the creation of the Calbright College and trying to find those folks that become stranded workers. And if we can try and catch people earlier so that they have this type of education, they're able to do the completions here, I think we could really shift the economic outcomes for some of these communities. And I think this type of data is really essential for us to do a deeper dive into, to really understand, why are we having disparate outcomes? Because I would expect that we'd be able to do a little better outreach and a little better support for these communities that need that support. Are there any staff comments or responses to Member Rucker? If not, this would be the time to move on to public comment. And we have, I know we had one very patient question from the public. So if any members of the public would like to comment, I do understand, as I mentioned before, that there is a delay. So you can use the chat or Q&A features in Zoom or via email, and you're also available via phone. So if, I don't know if it's Lisa, would like to handle the public comment?
Yes, so we have one public comment in Zoom and so far one in email. The one in Zoom is from Janine Mayer, and they say, in terms of the data rollout timeline, at what point will pathway coordinators be able to have access to data that will inform our conversations with LEAs as we help LEAs build new CTE pathways and analyze the results of existing pathways? And our email is from Kathy Boyd, who is the Director of Career Education, Educational Services for the Orange County Department of Education. And she states, based on progress made in connecting data between CDE and CCCCO, is there any hope that dual enrollment data at the local level can also be shared more easily between individual LEAs and community colleges? And I don't have anything else at this time.
Very good. Do we have any staff responses to those? None? I'm wondering about Jenny Mayer's question here about do we have an idea about the timeline that the pathway coordinators will get access to data? Are we missing Pradeep again? It looks like maybe we are.
Member Rollins, I can speak to the Strong Workforce K-12. You know, as I reported earlier today, we are waiting for the 1920 data, course enrollment data to be posted on the CDE public site in order for us to have access to the data that we need to analyze the outcomes, the interim measures. Once we're able to do that, we of course will share that with the pathway coordinators in the field to make sure that they are as informed as we are about how they can support their LEAs. So I don't have a date, obviously. We're dependent on the data being posted so that we can access it. But as I stated earlier, due to the pandemic, there have been delays. And so I don't have a date.
Very good. That's helpful. And I did notice that it seems like Dr. Kodamaraju is dropped off. He mentioned that he had internet connection problems earlier, and so it looks like it cut up with him a little bit. Member Rucker, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. My question goes to the data point as well. You may recall when we started the rollout on the applications, the timeline for the Strong Workforce and the CTEIG grants favored program administrators in reviewing and accepting the applications and doing the review and making the award determinations. And so there was a lot of conversation among the members of this panel that because of when data becomes available to the LEAs, the data that they must rely on as part of their rationale in their application came either just before the deadlines that were originally established. We started tinkering with those application timelines. And so there still is a data question about access and about when the information is received, but there's also a question now as we become more sophisticated with how we're producing and reporting out the data. Let me just point out, even when there wasn't a pandemic, there was a timeline problem for the LEAs in receiving the information in a timely way that it truly does become actionable. In case in point with the attachments we have here, there's a lot of important information about CTE concentrators and completers and what it tells us about students of color who may start a program and don't become completers. That's very actionable data. But as it relates then to the timelines for doing these applications and submitting the RFAs or the RFPs or whatever the acronym it is we're using for these applications. Actionable also is related to the time that LEAs need to have to talk to their stakeholder groups, to figure out and understand what's going on in their programs, and talk more directly at a more granular level about how they should be interpreting and understanding that data. So there's some tensions in our timeline and some tensions in what we're asking LEAs to do and being thoughtful about the use of this data. So what makes it actionable for us at this level, and what makes it actionable for them at the level that they work in the realities of the time that they have to do that stakeholder work, are also two different things. So I may be feeding more into the question we heard about data, but the reality is that has always been an ongoing concern for this panel as well.
Thank you for that, Member Rucker. I would concur there as well. That there's a lot of great work that we're doing now, I think, as far as trying to pull this data together, really help us inform how we can do better and how we can help shape these communities and inform our LEAs about how they can help be better informed in serving their community. So I think your point is very well made that there's a lot more we can do, and I look forward to getting some of this data and getting it in the right people's hands. Are there any other public comments?
No, there's not any more public comments. I just wanted to let everybody know I got a message from Pradeep, and yes, his internet went out and he is trying to get back on as soon as possible.
All righty. So when it gets back on, we will, with no other public comment, this will conclude the public comment period for this item. And we will move to a break because I know I could use at least a short one. I'm wondering, members, if you would want to take a lunch break now and have a little longer. We are ahead of schedule, or if you would be wanting to do a shorter break and push through to finish early.
Like a lunch.
A lunch? All right. If there's no objection there, it is now 11:02. Let's take a 30-minute break, and we will resume back at 11:32.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's go ahead and go live again. All right. If we are ready to go, then I'd like to confirm that we have a quorum and have the roll call.
Yes, Chair Rawlings.
I am present.
Vice Chair Sun. Member Grande.
Here.
Member McQuillan.
Here.
Member Rucker.
Here.
Ex officio Member McGuire.
Present.
And ex officio Member Rattray.
Here.
Wonderful. We have a quorum, and it is 11:35. So I'd like to welcome Shani Weber, Vice Chancellor of the Workforce and Economic Development Division at the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office, and Charlotte Cahill, Senior Director of Pathways to Prosperity at Jobs for the Future, who will discuss with the committee an update on the California State Plan for CTE. I know this is something I've been looking forward to. So Vice Chancellor Weber, it's yours.
Thank you, Chair Rawlings. Good morning. It's still morning. Good morning, Chair Rawlings, Vice Chair Sun, and members of the committee. I'm Shani Weber, the Vice Chancellor of Workforce and Economic Development at the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office. I'm here today to provide an update to the California State Plan for Career Technical Education. And let me run through what I will be covering today. Next slide, please. I will do a really quick recap of the strategic plan call to action discussions we've had to date, and then provide you an update to the plan development and the proposed phases that we are looking at, and also the proposed timeline. And then I will invite Charlotte Cahill from Jobs for the Future to provide us with a national perspective before we move into any discussion. And I would also just like to add that as I present this work, with the leadership changes that CTE obviously will need to have additional discussion amongst the California state planning team, the state team, in terms of moving forward with this work of developing the state plan, bringing any new members that may join that team up to date, and just having more detailed discussion about this. The other thing that I will also mention before I get into it is that the proposed plan that we're presenting to you is proposed, and recognizing that plans do to sort of change, modify, adjust as work continues and develop, and as we get input and learn more information. So with that, next slide, please. So you may recall that we had established the California State team for developing the California State Plan for CTE back in November of 2019. And the state team consists of representatives from the Chancellor's Office, from the California Department of Education, as well as the State Board of Education members. And it's a group that has been meeting and having these discussions since November of 2019. First, focused on the Perkins 5 federal planning and application that was submitted last year, and then turning our attention to the state team plan. And if you will recall, I believe it was in July that we recommended that the approach be a very sort of high-level strategic plan, call to action that is a forward-looking document with very clear goals and outcomes, incorporating all of the discussions that has occurred with the members, and the desire to be very innovative and bold in moving this work forward. And we very much of this, in terms of approach, was also inspired somewhat by the California Community College's Vision for Success work. Next slide, please. These are just some of the goals when we presented that framework that we wanted to keep in the strategic plan and call to action. That's really core and central. The idea of the student-centered approach, the idea that we consider the full ecosystem and the current state of the regional and local efforts, and as well as the state, and then ultimately considering who the benefactors are, which are students and employers, for this plan that we're working to develop. Next slide, please. Of course, really informing and providing very key input to this plan as well is the guiding policies principles that the committee has established. And also we had some discussions about the future of work and how that impacts this work that we're doing, and also all the body of work that has occurred with the development of the Perkins 5 application plan that was submitted. Next slide, please. Other considerations also include, a very, high focus on career pathways from K-12 to community college, the employment engagement efforts that are happening both in both systems, the K-12 and the community colleges, and then of course the cross-system partnership and the continuous improvement that needs to be built in as part of the strategies as we develop this plan. Next slide, please. We also recognize that there's some urgent topics around teacher prep and qualifications, as well as professional development, particularly for CTE programs. We also recognize that dual enrollment barriers will need to be understood and addressed in this work. And then obviously the outcomes, the student outcomes and the employment readiness is also a very critical factor in the state plan for CTE to be addressed. Next slide, please. Of course, since the plan was published in 2008, there's been a number of changes in our environment, in industry, even in our education space. Online education was emerging. Now it is the norm with accelerated by this pandemic. Competency-based education is a national movement, and California has really started, at least at the community college level, has started down this road on competency-based education, very critical in terms of aligning skill sets with the industry. Credential transparency is another issue that is a national movement that's emerging, and a number of states are looking at creating policies and framework around credential transparencies, tying skills to courses, programs, degrees, diploma, really addressing the issue that as employers are shifting towards skills-based hiring rather than looking at specific degrees or majors. And so those are just some things that have to be considered given what the pandemic has accelerated last year. And then you also, next slide, please. And then you will also recall we came in front of you in September to propose that strategic framework that we would organize and sort of create to look at developing the CTE plan, the 4 buckets, we call it, with the state team, really organizing our thinking and the approach into these 4 areas: the workforce supply that meets the demand, the instructional delivery and the support services that's required to support students and support their success and completion. And then really it's important to look at data that informs the investments that we're making, which a lot of investment is being made in CTE programs. I know we had a lot of discussion today about data, so I know you're fully aware of that. And lastly, looking at cross-systems alignment, it's something that we're very focused on, the purpose of this committee and the work that we're doing here. And it's very critical in moving students from K-12 into community colleges and beyond. And so cross-systems alignment is something that we will continue to have conversations on. And then, of course, you know, the discussion about equity and access being foundational to everything that we do. It is at the core, particularly even more so with the activities, the social justice movements that's happened last year as a result of the pandemic, the inequalities that is exposed, as well as the protest that was ignited due to the killing of George Floyd. So there's a lot of work that we need to do there. So next slide, please. So today, the update that I'm providing you is really looking at, with those 4 buckets, how are we going to dive deeper into looking at how we really do this work. And after quite some discussion with among the state team plan, California state team, we really felt these 4 areas are very critical and cross-cutting in a lot of ways and very much interconnected, and particularly in addressing the issues we think are really relevant and current. And career pathways will always be, I think, front and center, because the career pathways really informs the education pathways that have to be built to get students into careers, into good paying jobs. Part of that work is also related to dual enrollment and the processes and the structures and the barriers that will increase the number of students participating in higher education, whether it's through community colleges and transfer or directly to the four-year institution. In addressing dual enrollment, we cannot not look at teacher preparation and the issues related to teacher preparation that I mentioned earlier. Additionally, adult education, adult learners, and this idea of lifelong learning is also very critical to establish very early on in the K-12, student mindset, moving on to higher education, and then also adult learners, focusing on adult learners only because we're seeing such a huge number of job loss and job recovery is a really, really important issue for our state to get back to where we were, and also in preparation of hopefully, fingers crossed, us getting past this pandemic with vaccines rolling out. And then this idea of regional partnership development. We are all structured, I know the community colleges are structured based on regions, the workforce, the labor agency, the workforce development, California Workforce Development Board has regions, as well, focus as well, the governor's office initiative with Regions Rising, focusing on the underinvested, underserved regions. Those are all activities that are going on in the state. And because regions are so different and the needs are so different, the sectors are different, the partnerships work very differently. We felt the regional focus and partnership development is also a good way to structure this work. So the key area, another key area that I want to add of the discussions that we've been having among the state team was around the issue of the capacity of both agencies to conduct this work in a reasonable timeline and ensuring that we are doing a robust review of research, the available body of work from these meetings and discussions, the Perkins 5 plan input, and ensuring that we have deep and rich stakeholder engagement and input. So what we have done is we've agreed to engage Jobs for the Future to assist us in this work. Next slide, please. So we wanted to give you a visual and a graphic to show how this all comes together, and in terms of the buckets and the additional layer of focus, looking at, if you look at supply that meets the demand, it impacts career pathways. We need to talk about dual enrollment. Adult ed is in there, and regional partnerships have a role to play in that particular bucket. Same with effective delivery and support. All of these major areas, sort of, there's intersection points and connection points under data that informs the investment, as well as talking about cross-systems alignment. These are all areas where we have a lot of work going on, where we can leverage and really amp up, so to speak, the work that needs to be done. Next slide, please. So what we're proposing to you, we've spent a lot of time discussing this, that we want to make sure that the strategic plan and call to action would be really meaningful for the field and not just another policy document that people just look at. We felt that engaging the Jobs of the Future, who are national experts and experienced in the ins and outs and the development of the state plan, is really important. And so we're giving you a very high-level overview of the project timeline, and we're proposing a phased approach that is not just 1 year long, but also take into consideration a regional implementation effort providing the kind of technical assistance and the kind of professional development that the field would need to put this plan into practice. And then, of course, to know what whether it's working or not and what progress we're making, we need to also make sure we create space to review and look at outcomes. So in phase one, we're looking at engaging the stakeholders and understanding the context. I will go into more detail in each one of these phases in the next few slides. And we anticipate taking a good 6 months or so to do that this year in phase one. And then in phase two, the work will be around drafting the state plan and a number of other activities about that through January 2022, recognizing these are estimated timelines. And then taking a good year to work with the region and the field in supporting regional implementation of the state plan. And then finally, doing some initial assessment of results and outcomes in 2023. Next slide, please. So going into a little bit more detail about phase one, it's looking at, obviously, we need to do a review of the some background research, review of materials. There's a lot of materials to look at, plans, notes, reports, etc. that's already been produced. And then we had talked about conducting study sessions for the committee. And so we're looking at planning to hold 2 study sessions potentially in April and June. And we will be seeking your input in terms of what some of those topics might be. But we thought initially that we would look at some issues about really clarity around, the purpose of the state plan, building and sustaining regional career pathways partnerships. That's an area of focus, and looking at effective delivery. And then the second study session looking at new enrollment and teacher prep and more understanding and discussion around adult education. We also plan to, at the same time, conduct up to about 15 virtual focus groups with regional stakeholders. And we really do want to collect additional input, thoughts, ideas, and just have those discussions with the regional folks to really inform this work that we're doing. Next slide, please. Going into phase two, we would be looking at synthesizing all the research, the input, and also from the virtual focus groups and drafting the state plan. This, of course, will be a very iterative process. Another area we thought would be important to focus on is designing a communications and dissemination strategy about the state plan. That's when we would be doing this as well. There's also a phase where we will be managing public comments once there's a draft to be released. Ultimately, I'm not going into a lot of details, but ultimately the plan being approved by this committee and releasing a final version publicly through the field. Next slide, please. And then in phase three, this is I think really the critical, most critical part really, I think, to get field ownership and to try to affect the change that we want to see. A lot of ways, changing ways of doing things and practices involve changing mindset and culture. We're living through that in our system. And this is something that as we implement, we will draw on our experience with the vision for success and some of the work that we've been doing with the field, and hoping that that will also, part of the work that we'll be doing is creating some resources to support the regional implementation. And then obviously having statewide virtual implementation meetings by region with the folks to answer questions, to have additional discussions. Next slide, please. In phase 4, which is the end of 2022 and first part of 2023, we're looking at measuring outcomes. The proposed idea is to develop some kind of outcomes dashboard, identifying key metrics and benchmarks that would align to the state plan and the priorities, and then figure out a way, a structure sort of for us to own and then to maintain on measuring of future progress, which I think is important. And of course, as we do this, the work that we do in CTEIG, the K-12 Strong Workforce, and other programs like Adult Ed and even Perkins, we will need to take a look at where those success measures and the metrics would be relevant to incorporate in the state plan and the work that will be done here. So I'm going to pause here for a minute to see if you have any questions before I invite Charlotte to provide a national perspective about this work that we're doing.
Very good. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Weber. I would jump in here real quick with one question, and it's about when we do the focus groups, what kind of groups, what kind of constituents are we looking at making up those focus groups? Are we going to be are we going to be including students, practitioners in the field, those kind of things, or is it going to be mostly those that are involved in helping oversee and guide these the CTE programs?
It would be a very broad spectrum of individuals, and I will actually defer this to Charlotte to talk about, because we're drawing from their very deep experience in developing these plans and many effective practices that we want to incorporate in the work that we do here. Charlotte?
Yep.
Yes, hi everyone, and happy to jump in here quickly. So yes, I think absolutely it would be a broad spectrum of stakeholders looking particularly to engage folks who are doing this work now at the local and regional levels across the state. So yes to practitioners, and really our experience has been that these focus groups are important for two reasons. And one is that they provide lots of great information that can help to, support the development of a state plan. But the second is that they can help to build awareness and buy-in of the creation of the state plan in a way that is very helpful, when we get to implementation. And so I think what we're really hoping to do is get a better understanding of work that is aligned to the strategic framework for the state plan that is already happening in the state. We know that there are lots of innovative practices happening, at least in pockets across the state. And so wanting to understand better what those are and how we can elevate and support them and scale them through the state plan.
Very helpful. Thank you for that, and thanks for being here. Next, I have Member Grande, followed by Vice Chair Sun and ex officio Member McGuire.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Vice Chancellor Weber, for the presentation. I am very, very excited about seeing a California state plan for career education, and I am not to ask any questions at this time, but more about just commentary. I'm a little reluctant to measure the success of a virtual meeting in 2022 and 2023, because I was kind of hoping we'd be back in person by then. But I'm hopeful that we will be able to convene some of these focus groups non-virtually, maybe in tandem with the traditional conventions and conferences that, let's hope, will go back to some semblance of normalcy and maybe have in person with the CCC AOE and some of the other groups. But the one comment that I would make is this particular timeline, of course, has been extended a number of times with the process along the way, but COVID didn't help at all, and the pandemic has pushed it out even further. So I'm kind of glad in one sense that we now have this timeline that's going to put us on a trajectory for the next couple of years. And I'm also hopeful with the information that we were given prior to this presentation that we'll have the data elements in place as well. So we'll really come to this California State Plan with a clear understanding of where we are and where we can go. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Member Grande. Vice Chair Sun.
Hi. So yeah, thank you as well. So Shani, I had a question on the framework from a couple of slides back. I don't know if you're able to go back over to that.
To the graphic?
Yeah, to the graphic, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this makes sense. I had a question though on the box that says dual enrollment / teacher prep. So those two seem like two different areas of work or review and not necessarily two things that are similar. So I wasn't sure about that. I do think that teacher prep it's a big question. And so I thought maybe a separate box for that seems like it would make more sense.
We can certainly do that. We were thinking, I guess, of a 4x4 grid.
Okay.
But, symmetry, that doesn't matter. Agreed, yes. It's a big...
It's a form and function discussion, right?
That's right. And then my other question, had to do with, so I like the timeline and the phases that you're describing. It harkens back to the looking at the metrics, and we have this phased approach for data and metrics as well. And part of what we had approved at the last meeting was a timeline that outlines those phases. So we haven't seen a timeline yet, and I think we, after the conversation we had today, I think it would be helpful to build that timeline. And then we need to see how this timeline with the state plan and the timeline of the data conversations will kind of align and intersect.
We will definitely look at that.
Thanks. Yeah, and it would be helpful if we could, at our next meeting, see a timeline for the data metrics as well. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur on that one. I had ex officio member McGuire, and then I also have ex officio member Rattray.
Hi, I think most of my questions were answered. The only one I had, and maybe I missed it, is how would we go about recruiting the focus group participants and ensuring for diversity and location throughout the state as far as other demographic diversity markers?
So I think we will certainly focus on the diversity. That is a very good point. And there are a lot of groups out there currently regionally. We will leverage all of the folks that are engaged in our CTEIG and K-12 Strong Workforce programs, obviously. And then as well as our Strong Workforce programs, I think there's a lot of diversity in our adult ed programs. So but I appreciate your pointing out that particular.
Thank you so much.
Great, good point. Ex officio member Rattray.
Jenny, thank you very much, and I'm excited about the progress. I'm very supportive. I think I said this last time, so I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at this, but in our first year of existence, Patricia DeCoste and the whole team put together like a whole series of topics, and we really dove deep, and they had a lot of great presenters present some really important good work around the state. And that led us to a lot of deep discussion as a committee. And it also helped us to develop the guiding policies, of course, the guiding principles, excuse me. But then we had to put that on hold. We wanted to get ahead, and then we put it on hold as we got the Perkins reauthorized and then dove deep into the Perkins. and now we've, and also a strong workforce. I just hope that we've made available to you and the team some of the rich presentations and discussions that happened that first year, and that can help us inform this go forward now that we're kind of restarting the longer term discussion. Have we been able to make that available to the team, and has that helped you as you've tried to think this through?
Yes, great question, Member Rattray. We did. Well, part of the analysis was looking at, if you're referring to what was done in 2017 and all those activities that, yes. So we did look at that based on your request and you had raised it, and analyze what was looked at, what was discussed. And we also recall a suggestion to maybe not duplicate that and look at what has changed and what is been new developments since then, and that's what we have mostly focused on, particularly for the study session, so that we're not duplicating efforts. And hopefully that will be the case.
Thank you.
All right, and I believe Dr. Kodaramaju has a partial answer also for Member McGuire's question. Dr. Kodaramaju.
Thank you, Chair Rawlings. And I apologize to everyone for having internet issues. I mean, this is probably after 10 months, it was my turn. So one of the things that we do have as guide is within the Perkins 5 state plan guide is a list of stakeholders that we could or we needed to include when we did that federal state plan. So I think that would be a good starting point, and I think I'm fully aware of Member Rucker presaging all of this is by making sure that we have more emphasis on the practitioner out there, both of the secondary and post-secondary, because, for example, this whole question of teacher prep is one thing we have to look at. The other is dual enrollment. And just to circle back to what Vice Chair Sun was saying, I think one thought that we had of putting the teacher prep and dual enrollment, although I agree it should be separate, was the different perceptions of the credentialing that is required for dual enrollment. And so that, I think, is something that probably needs to be discussed within this larger context. But I do agree with Chair Sun that it's probably a separate issue that could be combined later down the road.
All right, that's helpful. Are there any other member questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we can continue.
Hi, everyone. It's Charlotte Cahill from Jobs for the Future. I know I already said hi briefly, but we'll just jump in here and say a little bit more about the national perspective. And before I do that, it occurs to me that some of you may be wondering what a Jobs for the Future is. And so Jobs for the Future is a national nonprofit organization. We have offices in Boston, in Oakland, and in Washington, D.C. And I lead much of our national career pathways work and work in particular with state level teams that are developing state plans for education and workforce development aligned with pathways. And so really, wanted to just elaborate a little bit on some of the thinking about how a national perspective can be incorporated, I hope helpfully, into the development of a state plan. And so really, we, want first and foremost to make this process as efficient as possible. And I think part of that is, being able to bring to the table for consideration what we know about what has worked and critically what hasn't worked elsewhere. So as I think even just over plans that I've been engaged in the last year, I recently wrapped up some work on a state plan for Texas. And so feel like that gave me a good perspective on, you know, what works and what doesn't work in developing a plan for a large state with a lot of regional diversity within the state and diversity along many axes, including very urban and very rural areas, which we know have somewhat different needs and very different economies often. So, you know, bringing some of that perspective. Similarly, you know, did some work earlier this year with Hawaii on developing a state plan that was really intended to spur economic recovery from, you know, coming out of the pandemic. And so having some ideas too about, as we think about using this plan to support particular outcomes for employers, I think in California as one of the beneficiaries that have been noted, thinking about what that looks like, as well as thinking about, you know, effective practices for students. And then as we dig into particular elements of the plan, you know, we can look to states like Ohio that has a really strong dual enrollment policy in place, or the college and career pathways endorsements in Illinois, or youth apprenticeship in Colorado. And I think some of that can come in the study sessions with this committee that we've been talking about. And so we'll be really eager to learn more from you all about priority areas, recognizing to the earlier point, you know, that we don't want to duplicate conversations that have already been had on some of these key topics, but can certainly look to, you know, what are the latest and greatest practices that we're seeing across the country, and how might those be incorporated into the plan, which also then brings me to this point about, we also don't want to reinvent any wheels within the state of California. And so very much recognize that, first of all, there's lots of related work underway. Much of it has been underway for years, and wanting to draw on the systems that are already in place, the guiding principles, all of the programs and initiatives, including the ones discussed today, to really build a plan that is, you know, pushing ahead on many of these initiatives, and as well as bringing in innovation where needed, and can really get to creating change. And then as we think about this, Sheni used the word regional many times when she was talking through the plan, and that's really a reflection of the emphasis on ecosystems as a critical piece of doing this work well, and understanding that in order to create high quality CTE programs, cross-sector stakeholders need to be engaged. And so as we think about regional implementation in particular, we're really eager to focus on how we can build cross-sector regional leadership teams as needed, recognizing again that those already exist and are very strong in some regions of the state, and how again we can scale that as an effective practice where needed across the state to bring in all of the people who are needed, first of all, to build high quality CTE programs, and who I think can genuinely stand to benefit in one way or another from the existence of effective practices in CTE. So I will pause there and see if there are any questions.
All right, that's good info. I think this will all be very helpful. I like the fact that we're going to be taking the best from the best and putting it together, because that's what California likes to do. So members, are there any questions or comments? I see no hands. All right. And Shani, does this conclude our presentation?
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate all your comments and all your inputs and thoughts.
All right, I really look forward to this work. So we are ready for public comments on this item. Of course, it's available via phone, email, or Zoom. And so if there are any members of the public that would like to comment on this item, please go ahead and do so now, and we will give you a moment to quickly type whatever you need to share. I currently do not see any comments in Zoom. Lisa, if you can catch me on that if I'm not correct.
No, there's no comments on Zoom, email, or through the phone.
All right. Very good. So
I
it
just
seems like
wanna...
we got a lot of our questions answered. Yes, go ahead.
Chair Rollins, I just wanted to thank Charlotte Cahill for joining us today and taking the time out to participate in this meeting.
Yes, I share that. Thank you so much. It's very helpful. We look forward to working with you.
Likewise, and thank you for having me. It's been great to listen in on all the discussion today.
Wonderful. All right, if there are no public comments, let's see here. So seeing none, we will close public comment on this item, and then we will move to our last item, which is public comment on any items not on the agenda that have not been covered here today. And so just in the interest of fairness, we do keep a 2-minute limit on those comments. So if there's any member of the public that would like to comment on items that we have not addressed today, please let us know now. I do not see any on Zoom. Lisa, are there any on phone?
Sorry, 1 second. We actually had a phone number issue, so I'm updating the slide, and I'll be posting that right now.
Very good. I know we've had some really insightful, wonderful public comments over the years, so we look forward to any thoughts folks have to share. And do we have any via email?
No, not at this time.
All right. We'll give one more moment if anyone on Zoom has any to give, and hopefully we'll catch folks that needed the correct phone info.
Yep, I don't see anything coming in.
Are there any members that have additional comments or thoughts?
Just want to congratulate you on an awesome first meeting. Well done.
Thank you. Right? You put me in the spot here, right? Yeah, this has been great. Of course, we have a magnificent committee and great staff, so I appreciate the support on that. And I'm really looking forward to getting a lot of work done this year.
And Chair Rawlings, Member Rucker has something to say.
Oh, very good. Oh, yes, Member Rucker.
Well, also, I want to congratulate you for your magnificent job in chairing on this meeting today. I have great faith in you that this is the start of something wonderful. With this new year, we didn't just turn a calendar page. This is the meeting we had today and the very substantive conversations we had, particularly around data and issues concerning diversity and access. We're also turning a page on how we think about what these programs are supposed to be doing. And so when we start talking about accountability, not the big A accountability about the school dashboard, but the little a accountability about what the programs are actually doing, I'm hoping that that the work that we've done today and the work that Dr. Weber is showing is being undertaken with the development of the CTE program, that we're also turning the page on just simply grant making and handing out money without really understanding or thinking about what those funds are supposed to be doing. And so while it's great that we're going to be able to continue funding programs, it becomes more important to be accountable for who it is that we are bringing into those programs and what those conversations look like with the LEAs that are being funded, to ask them how they are being tasked to change what they do to create availability and access for their students. It's not enough just to put the program on the master schedule. There's work and conversations that have to happen with school counselors. There's work and conversations that need to happen with the students and the parents themselves to help them understand what the offerings are and the impact of the work that's being done with these programs. So, if I kept track of the number of times diversity was actually said during today's meeting, and I lost count at 32. So I know that diversity is on everybody's mind who sat on this panel and participated today. But diversity is not just looking at the number of faces that are shown on this panel. Diversity is understanding that there clearly is right now in California programs a disparity in the access and a disparity in the practices for recruiting and engaging students of color in these programs. So when we talk about diversity, we're not just talking about the representation and the data points that are shown about how many statewide, but as I said earlier in the conversation with Dr. Kodamraju, it's about understanding what happens when these numbers and these students begin to disappear as we move down from the state level and look at more granular reporting at the county, at the LEA, and even at the school side level. Because the students are there, but the fact that they're not showing up in the programs talks about what practices are happening at the local level that may or may not be benefiting or accruing to the benefit of the students that we think we're talking about when we use in broad terms the word diversity. So I would like to make sure I charge the members of this panel going forward, regardless of who shows up for this meeting today, that when we talk about diversity, we're also speaking to how we hold ourselves and the funded programs accountable for what they are doing to address issues of diversity. So thank you very much.
So well said, as always. That's absolutely a wonderful note to end on. Are there any other comments from members? All right. With that, I just want to thank everyone for wonderful participation, wonderful information. I'm looking forward to a lot of really great work ahead this year. And just want to share that our next meeting is scheduled for Friday, March 19th, 2021, starting at 10:30 a.m. Right here on Zoom, right? So currently it is 12:25 p.m. And if there is no objection, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Have a great weekend.